So if we dive inside the solo synth, we press the edit button. You'll see the XW-P1's really easy to navigate. We see access to our oscillator blocks, our total filter. If we go into the oscillator section, up at the top of the screen you'll see that we're looking at Synth 1. We can use these plus and minus buttons to scroll through all of our different oscillators available, from noise, external source, PCM2, PCM1, Synth 2, Synth 1. So when we dive in, here's our oscillator section. We can pick what kind of waveform we're using on Synth 1, and again, navigation's the same. I can scroll back and forth between all the different oscillators very easily and choose what kinds of sounds I want to use. As far as depth, of course, we can set the pitch of that instrument. We can do different key tracking. So if I wanted to reverse this sound and have the scale go backwards, I could do that. I have pitch envelopes for each oscillator. So envelope depth, pitch envelope, and LFO 1 and 2 depth for that oscillator. You get some additional options with oscillators 1 and 2, depending on your waveform selected, to drive pulse width modulation. Okay. So in the oscillator section, it has everything to do with your waveform and pitch, be it modulated by envelopes or LFOs. If we back up, you'll see that there's a filter section for this oscillator as well. Here we have just a basic low-pass filter. It is not resonant at this stage. We can, again, modulate it with velocity, key tracking, and it has its own envelope and its access to LFOs 1 and 2. And you repeat this same filter access for Synth 2, 3, 4, and your external source and your white noise. Everything is summed at a total filter. So all 6 oscillators go here. There's 3 different filter types: low pass, band pass, and high pass. This filter is resonant, and again, touch tracking or velocity tracking. You can set up your envelopes, which can re-trigger, and once again, access to your LFOs. So lots of options in the solo synth itself. Okay. All right. When you go to a hex layer sound, since this is a polyphonic sound, it's using a lot more horsepower. Let's take a quick look at what's under the hood. You'll see a really similar architecture. If I go to Layer Edit, and up at the top I see L1, that means Layer 1. I can choose, from what sample set is being used. I can map it out, change its tuning, change its pan position, also change its touch sensitivity. A more basic envelope here. So attack, decay, sustain and release, effect send, and key, not only key range, but key velocity switching I can do with low and high range. So these screens are duplicated for layers 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Again, just by using these plus and minus buttons, I can really get around this fast. Each layer does have, again, a basic non-resonant filter that is adjustable with touch sensitivity, but not a resonant filter in a hex sound. You should also know that with hex sounds, filter control is not real time. It will happen when you re-trigger the sound. So in that example, in fact, the arpeggiated part that I was modulating was a hex sound, and I was on each step of the arpeggiation, we were having the filter at a different position. So when you go to that polyphonic sound, it changes a little bit, but lots of flexibility. So far, we've only talked about one sound at a time. There's a performance mode on the XW-P1 that allows you to combine 4 different types or 4 different zones at once. You choose either one solo synth, one hex, or one drop bar organ. You can only use one of those at a time, but then your other 3 zones can use the other 400 sounds in the instrument. Each zone in the XW-P1 can be an internal instrument or an external MIDI device, and you can access the USB and MIDI outs independently. So you can drive maybe an iPad over USB and another MIDI device, the standard MIDI out. Here's in the performance mode is where you can determine the assignments for your knobs. You'll see that just about everything under the sun is available as far as continuous controllers. You can then determine whether your zone accesses those knobs or not. So it will be shared between the 4 zones. So assignment of the pedal, does this zone respond to, in fact, let's dive in and look at what you can do with an individual zone. Again, you can set your key range, its volume, pan position, transposition, effect send, whether or not you're accessing the insert effect. There is one insert effect that is shared. So if you're using a delay or something on your lead, you can choose whether or not other sounds share that delay or the distortion or whatever the effect might be. So lots of depth. Here's where you determine whether or not a zone is accessing those controls or not, because you might want the sound, one sound to use the knobs and another zone not to. And again, independent switches for wheels and other controllers. You can have the arpeggiator work on one zone and not another. Same with the phrase sequencer. So that's a quick look inside the XW-P1. A lot of depth. That's just a quick look.